As a guy who recently turned 40, I grew up in the 1990s. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why it was awesome and also maybe why it wasn't quite so awesome. So the 90s were a simpler time. There wasn't all of this tech that's out now, but then at the same time, there wasn't the easy access to information that there is today. But in this video, I'm going to share 5 things that were absolutely amazing about the 90s, and then 5 things that maybe weren't so amazing. So to kick it off, rock music was absolutely at its peak in the 90s. There's going to be tons of artists that I didn't include here that you might like, but to start with, you had the likes of Nirvana, Green Day, Oasis, Guns N' Roses. The rock, punk rock, metal scene was absolutely peak in the 90s. However, on the flip side, the internet barely worked. So if you grew up in the 90s, you will remember this sound. That's the sound of a dial-up modem. And in the 90s, it would plug into your phone line, so you couldn't use the phone and be on the internet at the same time. I've lost count of the amount of times my mum yelled at me to get off the phone because I was trying to ask Jeeves something. And yes, that was before Google. So back in the day, in the 90s, the internet barely worked. You used dial-up modem, and Google didn't even exist. So how did you even find things? The answer is you couldn't really. You had a few websites that you would go on, like the news, sports, those kind of things. But even an image, just an image, might even take 30 seconds to a minute to download. And forget watching any video content because it could take 5-10 minutes to download a 3 megabyte clip. That's how old the internet used to be. So for everyone watching this, cheers to the internet. But let's get back onto a positive. A pro is gaming was absolutely revolutionary back in the 90s. Now, people older than me might say it was more revolutionary back in the 70s and 80s, but for me, the progress that we saw during the 90s was absolutely incredible. You went from things like Mortal Kombat, which was one of the original fighting games that you actually saw blood and a bit of violence on it. That saw a huge shift in everything, culture across the world, not only just in gaming. And then you had things like one of the best platformers ever made in Super Mario World. You also had Sonic on the Mega Drive, if you were more of a Sonic fan, but platform games were incredibly popular back in the 90s. And then for me, moving from the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation, which launched later in the 90s, one of the best RPGs ever made in Final Fantasy VII was released. Now, we've just seen a re-release, a remaster of Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 5. This was right back in the day and it's making me feel a little bit old, but the story behind that and how it was put together, you had 4 discs because one disc didn't really hold that much information. But RPGs and the rise of the PlayStation back in the late 90s felt new, it felt exciting. These kind of games hadn't been seen before. Whereas now when you buy a game, it's more of the same. It's a sequel, it's a remaster. If you're buying a brand new game, the graphics might be amazing, they might have improved a little bit. But a kind of base game, you might have seen before. Whereas back then in the 90s, it was revolutionary. There were new things coming out all of the time. And yes, they might not all have been incredibly polished, but take GoldenEye, for example, on the N64. It was one of the biggest, best 3D shooters that was ever made, and it's still regarded as one of them today. Looking back, the graphics were not amazing on any of these games, but the playability and the innovation utilised in them was absolutely groundbreaking. However, a con is the fashion wasn't quite as revolutionary back in the 90s. Believe me, I know, if you can see pictures of me back in the 90s, I don't even want to know what I was up to. But here are a few examples of what people used to wear back then. And if you didn't have a tracksuit like this, what were you doing? Because this was the fashion. Back onto a pro, which links in a little bit, is things were just cheaper back then. Yes, I know you got things like inflation going on, but for an example, I used to get £3 pocket money a week. That's 3 whole English pounds. Maybe that's around $5 in the US, but that would have to last me the whole week as a kid. That might sound pretty impossible now, right? But back in the day, I used to go to the shop and buy 100 penny sweets. That's right, a sweet would cost me 1 pence. So I could buy 100 sweets for £1. I'd then buy a magazine for 50p, maybe some stickers for 50p. Yes, I'd probably spend that £3 in one go, but things were just cheaper back then. And that extends across loads of things. A lot of our parents out there bought houses for what seems like nothing nowadays. And yes, inflation plays a part in that, but imagine buying a house for 40 grand. You know, now it's 10 times that at least in most places. And one thing I loved about the 90s is just things were cheaper. It just seemed to be cheaper even with inflation. Things just seemed more affordable overall. However, one thing that was not accessible or affordable were mobile phones. Mobile phones were new in the 90s, at least in terms of how widespread they were. I don't think I had a mobile phone until 97, something like that, maybe 98. And me and all my friends started getting them all around the same time. They started spreading like wildfire across all the schools and all those kind of things. But all you could do on them were text, call, and play Snake. That's pretty much the only game that all phones had back in the day. And the weird thing about it is that text costs 10 pence. So that's for a single text, which also had a character limit. You'd pay 10p for every text you'd send. There's none of this contracted stuff that there is now. You'd buy £5-10 top-ups and you'd go through them in days. So as I was getting a little bit older and I, might have a paper round or something and be able to pay for my own phone bills, I'd spend 30-40 quid a week just from texting people. That's how expensive phones were back then. And if you didn't have a Nokia back in the day, what were you doing? These phones were basically indestructible. On to another pro, we played outside back then. There were hardly any fears for child safety or anything like that. The internet wasn't as popular, and so when people went to play with each other, they played outside. You used to go knock on your friend's door without even telling them you're coming around. I know that sounds like a crazy idea now, but that's how it used to be. You used to go around your friends, knock on the door, ask if they wanted to come out and play, and then you'd spend the whole day outside just kicking a football about. I absolutely love those memories from my youth and I wouldn't change them for anything today. However, as the 90s began to come to an end, everybody thought that the world was literally going to end due to Y2K. Just look at this news article, for example. Everyone thought that the stock market was going to crash, the rise of the computer chip and mobile technology and all those things. Everyone just thought they were going to fail because when people set times on things, they were doing like 90, 91, 92. So people thought when it went round to 00 that things were just going to stop working. I remember reading and watching things and they said that even satellites were going to fall out of the sky. So people literally thought that the world could end come Y2K. Fortunately, nothing really happened and here we are today. Getting back to a positive, this is one for all of my Brits out there. Football was coming home in Euro 96 when we hosted the Euros. We had the famous song that still gets played today, 3 lines on a shirt and all of that. But unfortunately, we only got to the semi-finals where Germany knocked us out and then it led to this photo of Paul Gascoigne. If you weren't crying when we got knocked out, I don't know what you were playing at because the whole country fell extremely flat, but hosting the Euros was an absolutely iconic event of the 90s. And on to my final con of the 90s. It's a bit of a serious one, and it's just that there was less awareness about a ton of things. That's likely due to less globalization, less information sharing, all of those kind of things. But there's less awareness of things like mental health, racism, global warming, feminism, and pride. Just to touch upon a few things that are more commonplace today. So when you were growing up in the 90s, you weren't necessarily aware of these kind of things unless you were taught them in school. So that's one fantastic benefit of living today and growing up today compared to growing up in the 90s. But apart from that, which obviously is really important and I'm super happy is more common now, I wouldn't change growing up in the 1990s for any other time. I absolutely loved it. The rise of technology, incredible movies, TV shows, music, innovation, revolutions. It was an absolutely incredible time. If you're the youth of today and you're watching this, get outside, get off social media, put your phones down, go play with friends. And if you want to stay inside, try watching some stuff from the 90s. Terminator 2, for example, still one of the best movies ever made. Right, that's it for this video. If you want to hear me waffle about things from the 90s, about life in my 40s, all of those kind of things, make sure to hit that subscribe button and I'll see you in the next video.